In the year 1893, a 12-year-old boy in Germany loses his parents forever. On their way, they leave some money for him, but during future travels, that money is also stolen. At just 12 years old in Germany, Hans Wilsdorf became an orphan after the death of his parents, and his future seemed dark. In this situation, relatives sold Hans's parents' business and sent him to a boarding school. He was in this industry, so in 1900, at only 19 years old, he left Germany and headed to Switzerland. In Switzerland, he got a job at a watchmaking company called Kunhakat. His job was to check the accuracy of several hundred pocket watches daily. Doing this work, he developed a passion for making perfect watches. In 1903, he went to London to settle. The 33,000 German gold marks inherited from his parents were stolen, which was a huge setback for him, but he had no option but to keep moving forward. Upon reaching London, he took a sales and marketing job at another watchmaking company, and in the next 2 years, he learned about manufacturing and sales in the watchmaking industry. He realized that all watchmaking companies focused on making their watches overly fancy and decorative, while customers wanted simple, accurate, durable, and elegant watches. To change this situation, at only 24 years old, he decided to start his own watchmaking business. But there was a problem. Hans did not have sufficient capital to start the business, so he made his brother-in-law a business partner in exchange for capital. And thus, in 1905, the Wilsdorf and Davis firm was established. First, he noticed that travelers needed a watch to carry so they could catch trains or buses on time and reach their destination. Compared to normal watches, they made this watch smaller so travelers could carry it easily, and its pouch was made of high-quality leather to look premium and not break during travel. They named this watch the Portfolio Pocket Watch. Considering the company's first product, it was quite successful. Even though Hans started the company by making a pocket watch, he did not want to make pocket watches forever. He predicted that wristwatches would completely replace pocket watches in the future. So Hans shifted his entire focus to making world-class wristwatches. The problem was that customers at that time were not ready to accept wristwatches. Their perception was that wristwatches were only worn by females, but Hans wanted to change this customer perception. In 1906, Hans noticed that both males and females in Britain liked wearing bracelets, and here he launched silver and gold wristwatches in the market, whose straps were not leather but made of gold and silver, looking exactly like bracelets. Also, he did not call these watches wristwatches but rather a name that was so short it could neatly fit on the watch face and be easily pronounced in any language. He combined different alphabets to make over 100 names, and in this way, a pleasant-sounding name came to his mind: Rolex. In 1908, he got it trademarked. Rolex watch sales were quite good, but their accuracy problem was still not fully solved. Actually, wristwatch movements were quite small, which is why no one succeeded in making a perfectly accurate movement. Until 1910, Hans imported the movements for his watches from Switzerland, but now Hans decided to make his own movement. He immersed himself in the study of horology, met with expert watchmakers worldwide, and became an expert in movements himself. Then he developed his first wristwatch movement, the 15-line caliber 200. Basically, Hans made the world's most accurate wristwatch movement. Due to this innovation, Rolex's reputation grew significantly. Now, their watches were exported not only to Britain but also to other European countries. He also formed a team of over 60 exceptional people, and the business was continuously growing. But then a major event broke their growth story. World War I. To cover war costs, the British government imposed a 33% export duty on watches. As a result, overnight, Rolex prices increased by 33% compared to foreign competitors, and their sales crashed. To survive this crisis, Hans had to shift his entire company from Britain to Switzerland. Until then, Rolex was only the name of their watch brand. But upon arriving in Switzerland, they also named their company Rolex Watch Limited and restarted many business operations from scratch. Due to the war, the luxury watch market had crashed, but then Hans observed a very interesting trend. Suddenly, there was high demand for wristwatches from armies fighting in World War I. Actually, during the war, it was very important for all soldiers to see the time to coordinate actions like when to fire or move forward. In such situations, using pocket watches to see time was impractical because soldiers had to put down their rifles, open their coats, and then take out the watch. Therefore, armies started shifting to wristwatches, which made seeing time much easier. Seeing this, Rolex. And it had a luminescent radium-hour hand so soldiers could see the time even in low light. These trench watches helped Rolex do good business during the war. People in their respective countries regarded World War I soldiers as heroes. And when people saw their heroes wearing wristwatches, they also quickly started shifting to wristwatches. As Hans had predicted, wristwatches completely replaced pocket watches, but there was still a big problem with wristwatches. Their accuracy would deteriorate if dust or water entered them, and Hans decided to make a watch case that was extremely tight, so tight that its movement would never be damaged by dust, heat, or, most importantly, water. Hans noticed that until then, all watches were made with a snap-on mechanism, meaning watch components were simply fitted on top of each other, just like assembling a lunchbox. But for this reason, small gaps remained in the watch, allowing dust and water to enter. So Rolex designed a watch case with a screw-on mechanism for the first time, where watch components had grooves, and instead of fitting, they tightly screwed together. Along with this, rubber rings were placed at every important point to fill remaining gaps. Finally, the watch's winding crown sealed the entire body tightly like a submarine hatch. This watch could stay underwater for an unlimited time without any internal damage, just like an oyster. And so it was named Oyster. The Rolex Oyster, launched in 1926, was revolutionary, and revolutionary marketing was needed to promote it. Hans learned about Mercedes Glatze, a swimmer who claimed to be the first woman to swim across the English Channel, but many people doubted her claim. So to prove herself, she declared she would swim across the English Channel again, this time in front of the entire world's media. Hans contacted Mercedes and offered her to become the first Rolex brand ambassador. To promote the Rolex Oyster's waterproof capabilities, Mercedes planned to keep the watch attached to her necklace during the swim. Her attempt started well, and after swimming for about 10 hours, she covered nearly 80% of the English Channel distance. But unfortunately, after that, she was exhausted and had to be rescued immediately. Her swim was not successful, but when the Rolex Oyster was checked, it was in perfect working condition. Despite the unsuccessful attempt, Mercedes Glatze became popular everywhere due to her efforts, and along with her, the world's first waterproof watch, Rolex Oyster, also became popular. Hans showed Mercedes and Rolex together in his ads. In 1928, he hired Miss Evelyn Leigh, a top British actress, as a brand ambassador. In her ads, Evelyn wore the Rolex Oyster with her hand inside a fish tank. Due to such a unique marketing strategy, the Rolex Oyster's waterproofing features became very popular and took Rolex's success to the next level. But while the whole world praised Hans and Rolex, at that time, watches were completely mechanical, meaning they were powered not by a battery but by a mainspring. Basically, the watch crown had to be wound to tighten the mainspring, which then slowly unwound to power the watch's gears. Simply put, it worked like a wind-up toy. These watches had to be wound every 2 days. And if the crown was not tightly closed after winding the Oyster case, water could enter. So Hans's next goal was to make a fully automatic watch. Hans spent years solving this problem and finally invented the Perpetual watch. This was basically a semicircular rotor inside the watch that could rotate 360 degrees. This rotor was connected to the mainspring through multiple gears. When the wearer moved their hand or wrist daily, the rotor rotated, transferring energy via gears to tighten the mainspring. This meant the mainspring wound automatically just by wearing the watch. And so it was named the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Although many had tried to make automatic watches before, Rolex was the first to do it so successfully. The Perpetual made Rolex and Hans Wilsdorf legends in the watchmaking world. But then, in 1939, a huge disaster struck, World War II. Due to the war, the entire global supply chain was disrupted and Rolex sales crashed again. Despite all difficulties over the next few years, Hans ensured Rolex's survival. But then another tragedy occurred in 1944. So he regrouped his energy and returned to the work he was best at, making world-class watches. In 1945, Rolex completed its 40th anniversary, and on this occasion they launched the Rolex Datejust, the world's first automatic waterproof watch with a date display. But there was a problem, some people complained. As always, Hans worked on finding a solution. It is said that one day a drop of water fell on his watch, magnifying the date. Inspired by this, he added a 2.5x magnifying glass over the date on Datejust watches, solving the problem. By 1960, Rolex had launched many more revolutionary watches, such as the Rolex Explorer in 1953, which was a strong and unbreakable watch made for mountaineers and explorers so they wouldn't worry about watch damage. In 1955, Rolex launched the GMT Master. It had a rotating bezel and was mainly for pilots because pilots had to track different time zones while flying, which they could do using this bezel. Finally, in 1960, Rolex launched an experimental watch called the Deep Sea Special. It was designed to withstand the extreme water pressure of the deep sea. To test it in 1960, it was taken to the deepest known ocean point at the time, about 11,000 meters deep. Even at that depth, it was completely. With this, Rolex established itself as the king of watches. Whether it was the height of Mount Everest or the deepest point in the ocean, only one watch brand had the capability to handle every extreme condition, and that was Rolex. Hans had achieved with Rolex all those things that no other watchmaker could even dream of achieving. With this, in 1960, Hans Wilsdorf bid farewell to the world at the age of 79, leaving behind a watch brand. If you liked this video, I recommend you watch the next one.